All right, let's dive right in. When you hear the word philosophy, what comes to mind? Maybe stuffy lecture halls or dense, abstract debates? Well, today we're going to throw that idea out the window. We're journeying into a tradition that's incredibly ancient, one that sees philosophy not as a thought experiment, but as a practical, hands-on guide to living. Welcome to the world of classical Indian thought.
So, let's start with that big question. What even is philosophy? You know, in the West, we often treat it like a purely academic subject. It's theoretical. But in ancient India, it was something much, much more. It was a vital, practical endeavor, literally a way of life, a user manual for how to navigate the world and your own existence.
To really get our heads around this way of life, we have to go back to the source, the very beginning of Indian thought. And that source is an amazing collection of the most ancient sacred texts in India, known as the Vedas.
Now, these 4 Vedas are known as Shruti. In Sanskrit, that literally means what is heard. And that's a huge clue. It's because these texts weren't considered to be written by humans. They were believed to be divinely inspired, the actual word of the divine, which was heard by ancient sages, and then passed down word for word through oral tradition for centuries. We're talking about texts composed between 1500 and 900 BCE. They are the absolute bedrock of Hinduism.
And what's really cool is how they're organized. Each Veda has this intricate 4-part structure. It starts with hymns and mantras, then it moves into guides and commentaries on rituals. But it all culminates in what are called the Upanishads. And these are the philosophical heart of Hinduism, just packed with these profound reflections on the nature of reality.
So all those big philosophical ideas that were brewing in the Upanishads, well, they didn't just stay there. They laid the groundwork for 2 of the most important works of literature in all of South Asia, the great Indian epics. And these aren't just stories. They are massive, sprawling poems designed to teach philosophy through storytelling.
And trust me, these are not simple adventure tales. The Mahabharata, for example, uses this brilliant literary device called a frame tale. It's basically a story within a story. The main conflict is retold by different people across different generations. And what a powerful way to show that the lessons inside aren't just for one time or one place, they're totally timeless.
What's fascinating is how these 2 epics present almost opposite philosophical worlds. On one hand, you have the Ramayana. It gives us a vision of harmony, ideal families, a perfectly noble hero named Rama, and a war fought for a totally just cause. But then you have the Mahabharata, which throws us right into the middle of a messy, dysfunctional family feud. Its hero, Krishna, is way more pragmatic and complex, and the war is brutal, with the rules of ethics getting bent and broken all the time.
Okay, so you've got these divine texts, the Vedas, and these deeply human epics. How did people start to make sense of it all in a systematic way? Well, this need for interpretation, for a framework, led to the rise of formal schools of philosophical thought.
Peace schools are called the darshanas, and that Sanskrit word itself is a huge hint. It literally means to view or to see. And that's exactly what they are. They're like 6 different systems, or 6 different lenses for looking at the world, for interpreting the sacred texts, and ultimately for figuring out how to achieve liberation from suffering.
The 6 orthodox schools, meaning the ones that accept the authority of the Vedas, are Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. Now, even though they all start from the Vedas, don't think they always agree. Oh no, they often debate and argue, sometimes fiercely, about the nature of reality, the mind, and the best way to live.
So to make this a little more concrete, let's just grab one as an example. Take the Samkhya school. It proposes what we call a dualistic reality. It says that the entire universe is just an interaction between 2 fundamental principles, Purusha, which is pure, untangled consciousness, and Prakriti, which is, well, all the physical stuff, matter. And for Samkhya, the whole point is to understand that difference and separate your consciousness from the material world.
And believe it or not, this brings us right back to where we started. Philosophy as a practical way of life. Because these ancient texts and these old schools of thought, they aren't just historical artifacts collecting dust. They are still being actively studied today for practical modern lessons.
And you might be surprised where these epics are popping up. We're talking business schools. Seriously, modern scholars are digging into these ancient stories for timeless insights into leadership, ethics, and corporate strategy.
The Mahabharata, for instance, is like a masterclass in strategy. It hammers home the importance of preparation, of figuring out how to turn your weaknesses into strengths. It teaches the incredible value of building strong alliances. It even demonstrates a concept we think of as modern, like distributed leadership. The army in the story had 7 commanders, which allowed for a much more agile and focused command structure.
And then, the Ramayana offers its own set of key leadership lessons. You see the power of motivating your team, like when the hero Hanuman has to be reminded of his own forgotten potential. It really emphasizes the need to understand your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, a classic SWOT analysis. And it celebrates radical innovation, like, building a seemingly impossible bridge to overcome a massive obstacle.
So here's the big takeaway. Classical Indian thought is a living, breathing tradition. You can see this incredible flow from divinely heard truths through epic stories about human struggle and right into modern-day management theory. It has always been, and it still is, focused not just on what we should think, but on how we should live.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. If these stories, thousands of years old, can still hold strategic solutions for a modern boardroom, what timeless truths might they hold for you?